Yaron Thorne checked his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes, running a hand through his dark, tousled hair as the train's intercom echoed through the crowded platform. Further delays due to track maintenance. We appreciate your patience. Patience was not one of his virtues. He exhaled sharply, adjusting the strap of his tailored coat. The private jet he usually took from Chicago to New York was grounded due to a freak lightning storm, and last-minute commercial flights were booked out. The only option left, a train. A 4-hour ride on a Northeast regional, like some kind of commoner. Not that he minded being around people, he just didn't like being trapped with them. He stepped onto the train as the doors hissed open, dodging a group of college kids with oversized backpacks and a woman struggling with a toddler. No first-class cabin, no assistant, no espresso. Just him, a briefcase full of confidential merger documents and a seat in coach. He spotted an empty two-seater by the window and slid into it, hoping no one would take the seat beside him. That hope died 5 seconds later. "Hey, is this taken?" Yaron looked up, and the first thing he noticed was the curls wild, honey-brown curls tied up in a messy bun and a pair of bright eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses. She was balancing a tote bag, a puffer jacket, and a brown paper bag that smelled suspiciously like peanut butter. "No, go ahead," he said, shifting slightly. "Thanks," she said, dropping into the seat beside him with a sigh of relief. "This train is madness. I almost got elbowed by a grandma fighting for a window seat." Yaron gave a tight-lipped smile, already turning back toward the window. He wasn't in the mood for conversation, but she didn't seem to notice or care. "I'm Sloane Carter, by the way," she said, offering him a peanut butter cracker from her bag like they were on a road trip together. He blinked at her. "Yaron, I know these look like kindergarten snacks, but trust me, they slap," she said, popping one into her mouth. Yaron hesitated, then took one. Why not? The day couldn't get worse. "So," she said, chewing thoughtfully, "let me guess. You missed your flight and now you're stuck slumming it with the rest of us." He turned his head, surprised. "How'd you know?" "The shoes," she said, nodding at his polished leather Oxfords. "And the watch. You don't exactly scream Amtrak regular." He gave a low chuckle. "Fair," she grinned, pleased with herself. "What do you do? Hedge fund, private equity, tech guy?" He raised an eyebrow. "What makes you think I'm not a teacher or a mechanic?" "Because teachers don't wear coats that cost more than my rent." He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at her. Really looked. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, her sweater slightly oversized, and her tote bag had a patch that reads "Support local artists." She was chaos wrapped in warmth, the kind of person who shared snacks with strangers. "What about you?" he asked. "I'm a children's book illustrator," she said, digging into her bag for a juice box. "Don't laugh." "I wasn't going to." You hesitated. "I was trying to place the smell of your snack bag. Now I know it's peanut butter and apple juice." She laughed so hard she snorted. Busted. The train lurched forward, and Yaron leaned back, watching the city blur outside the window as they pulled away from the station. For the first time that day, he wasn't thinking about boardrooms or deadlines. He was thinking about how easy it was to talk to this woman. How her laugh filled the tiny space between them like sunlight. "So what brings you to New York?" he asked after a quiet moment. "Big meeting with a publisher tomorrow. They might pick up my latest book. Fingers crossed," he nodded. "Good luck." She smiled, then looked at him curiously. "And you?" He considered lying, saying he was just visiting, but something in her gaze made him want to be honest. "Business meeting. Merger talks. It's complicated, sounds fancy. It's exhausting." She tilted her head. "You don't like it. I like building things. But lately it's just numbers. People I don't trust, meetings that don't mean anything." She nodded, then reached into her bag again. "You need another snack." "I don't think, trust me. Pretzels fix everything." He laughed again, and this time it surprised him. The sound felt rusty. Like he hadn't used it in a while. They talked for half the ride. About everything and nothing. She told him about her niece who thought she was famous because her drawing was once in a school library. He told her about his bulldog, Jasper, who hated everyone except his housekeeper. She listened like no one ever had. When the train suddenly screeched to a stop halfway through Connecticut, the lights flickering overhead, the conductor's voice came through. "Apologies, folks. We've hit a signal delay. We'll be stationary for about 45 minutes." Yaron groaned. "Perfect. Could be worse," Sloane said, taking off her coat and curling her legs onto the seat. "You could be stuck with someone boring." He looked over. Her head was leaning against the window, her curls a halo around her face. "Yeah," he said softly. "Could be worse." She turned her head. "You okay?" He nodded. "Just surprised." "By what?" "That a train delay turned out to be the best part of my day." She looked at him for a long moment, then reached into her bag and pulled out a tiny chocolate bar, unwrapping it and handing him half. "No one should suffer delays without chocolate," she said. He took it, and their fingers brushed. Neither of them pulled away. The train jolted forward again, but neither of them noticed. They were already moving in a different direction together. The train finally pulled into Penn Station just after 8 p.m., nearly 2 hours behind schedule. The platform was chaos, commuters rushing, announcements blaring, suitcases dragging across concrete. Sloane adjusted the strap of her tote bag over her shoulder and turned to Yaron, who hadn't moved yet. "Well," she said, brushing a curl out of her eyes, "we survived." Yaron stood, his briefcase in one hand, his coat draped over his arm. Barely. He didn't want the moment to end. He hadn't expected to feel that way, but something about the way the evening had unfolded left a strange ache in his chest. He wasn't used to lingering. Sloane shifted her weight. "I should probably find my cousin. She said she'd meet me upstairs by the 24-hour pizza place." "That's our weird little tradition." He hesitated. "Can I walk you there?" She looked at him for a moment too long, as if deciding whether to say yes. "Sure, I mean, it's not far." They moved through the crowd together, dodging commuters and tourists. The fluorescent lighting overhead cast everything in a dull glow, but it didn't dull the tension between them. Not the bad kind. The kind that hums just beneath the surface, waiting to become something more. "So," Sloane said as they climbed the stairs, "are you heading to a hotel or home, penthouse in Midtown?" She blinked. "Oh, of course," he glanced sideways. "What?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just, you don't really give off penthouse energy." He raised an eyebrow. "What kind of energy do I give off?" She laughed. "Honestly, like you're always 5 seconds away from firing someone." He looked affronted for a beat before laughing. "That tracks." They reached the upper level where the scent of melted cheese and garlic hung like smog. Sloane scanned the crowd, then pointed. "There she is, the one in the red parka waving like a maniac." A young woman was bouncing in place, her mittens flapping like flags. "She seems enthusiastic. She's had 3 sodas and half a cinnamon bun. She's vibrating." They stood there for a second. Yaron cleared his throat. Would you?" They both stopped, and Sloane laughed. "You first," she said. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow?" She blinked. "Like actual dinner, not crackers on public transportation. I know a place, quiet, good food, real chairs." She hesitated. Not because she didn't want to, because she did, too much, and that scared her. "I don't usually do things like this." He looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "Neither do I." That tipped it. "Okay," she said softly. "What time?" 7. "I'll send a car." "A car?" He didn't elaborate. Just reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slim black card. "Write your number on this." Sloane dug into her bag for a pen. "You carry blank cards with you, emergency meetings, or spontaneous dinners with illustrators." She handed the card back, and their fingers brushed again. This time the contact lingered. She didn't pull away. Behind her, her cousin called her name. "I should go," Sloane said, voice low. He nodded. "Tomorrow, then?" She turned, then paused. "Don't stand me up, Mr. Penthouse." "Not a chance." She disappeared into the crowd. Yaron stood there for a moment longer, the noise of the station swallowed by something quieter inside him. Something unfamiliar. The next morning, he pushed open the doors to his office building in Midtown, already halfway through a call with his head of acquisitions. "No, I don't want to hear projections until we've confirmed the valuation. Get the numbers from Boston and call me back." He ended the call and dropped his phone on the desk, loosening his tie. His assistant, Claudia, poked her head in. "Coffee's on your desk. Also, your calendar's cleared for tonight at your request." "Right," he said, taking the coffee. "Thanks," she hesitated. "Should I know why?" He gave her a look. "Got it," she said, vanishing. He glanced at the card on his desk with Sloane's number written in blue ink. The handwriting was slightly crooked, her letters looping playfully. He didn't usually follow up on spontaneous connections. He didn't make them. But something about her had rooted itself in his thoughts. He picked up his phone and dialed a number, Dominic's, reservation line. Table for 2. 7 p.m., private booth. Name, Thorne. He hung up and stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Deals could wait. Tonight wasn't about business. At exactly 6:45, a black town car pulled up outside a quiet restaurant tucked between designer boutiques. Inside, the lighting was low, the booths velvet-lined, the waitstaff silent and practiced. Sloane stepped out of the car in a navy wrap dress and ankle boots, her curls pinned half up, eyes scanning the entrance. She looked nervous, like she hadn't decided whether this was a mistake. He stood as she entered, one hand in his pocket. "You clean up okay," she said, offering a half smile. "You look." He paused, searching for a word that wouldn't make her bolt. "Beautiful." The hostess led them to a private booth near the back, half shielded behind an etched glass partition. As soon as they sat, a waiter appeared with a bottle of wine. "I didn't pick this," she said as he poured. "I asked what pairs best with peanut butter crackers." She laughed into her glass. "You're ridiculous," he watched her carefully. "You thought I wouldn't show." She didn't deny it. "You don't exactly strike me as someone who follows through on casual train flirtations." "This isn't casual." That silenced her. She looked down at the menu, then back up. "Why me?" He leaned forward. "You made 4 hours feel like 10 minutes. That doesn't happen often." The wine arrived. Dinner followed. They talked about everything they hadn't covered on the train: her mother's obsession with mystery novels, his failed attempt at learning guitar, the time she got locked inside a children's museum after hours. The conversation was effortless, electric. When dessert came, chocolate mousse with sea salt, he watched her reaction as she took a bite. "This is dangerous," she said, closing her eyes. "Want me to look away?" "No, I want you to understand that if you try to steal a spoonful, I will stab you," he laughed, genuinely. Julie noted. As the evening wound down, their conversation slowed but never stopped. The restaurant emptied around them. Outside, the city pulsed under streetlights, alive and humming. Yaron offered her his arm as they stepped into the cold. "I'll walk you to your place," he said. "You don't have to." "I want to." Halfway down the block, she stopped. "I'm trying not to overthink this." He looked at her. "Don't. That's your solution." "Yes." She looked up at him, her breath visible in the air between them. "I don't know what this is." "Neither do I," he said. "But I'm not ready for it to be over." She hesitated. Then slowly she reached up, fingers brushing against the lapel of his coat. "Okay," she whispered. He leaned down, and the city disappeared. For the second time in 24 hours, the world shifted beneath them. Only this time, it was exactly where they wanted to go. Yaron adjusted the cuffs of his charcoal suit as he stepped off the elevator onto the 26th floor of the art gallery. The space was abuzz with soft conversation, glinting champagne flutes, and the occasional flash of a camera. He didn't usually attend events like this, especially not ones filled with industry types he had no intention of doing business with, but tonight wasn't for them. It was for her. He scanned the room as he handed his coat to an attendant. The gallery was hosting an exhibit featuring rising illustrators, and one of the names on the invitation had stopped him cold when his assistant had tossed it onto his desk that morning. Sloane Carter. She hadn't mentioned it. Not once. Not during their dinner, not after their walk, not even when they'd spoken on the phone 2 nights ago while she was painting with her niece, and he was stuck reviewing pitch decks. She talked about clouds shaped like turtles and the accidental glitter explosion in her kitchen. Not about this. He found her standing near a canvas, speaking animatedly to an older woman with silver hair and thick black glasses. Her dress was soft copper, falling just below the knee with sleeves that fluttered as she gestured. Her hair was half-pinned, half tumbling in waves down her back. She hadn't seen him yet. He waited until the conversation ended, then stepped forward as she turned. Her eyes widened. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, her voice just above a whisper. "I wasn't invited," he replied. "You got one." "I get a lot of things," he said, glancing at the painting behind her, a whimsical forest scene with foxes reading books under giant mushrooms. "This one's yours," she nodded. "It's from a series I did for a pitch last year." They didn't take it, but the gallery director saw them and asked if I'd submit. He looked at her, not the canvas. "You should have told me. I didn't want you to feel like you had to come. Or worse, pretend to be impressed." "Sloane," he said, stepping closer so only she could hear, "I'd fly across the country to see what you make." She swallowed hard. "You're not going to say something outrageous like I'll buy the whole wall, are you?" He glanced at the price tag beside the painting. "I'd rather let someone else buy it. Art like this should be in a child's room, not locked in a boardroom." Her hand touched his lightly. "That might be the most unexpectedly perfect thing you've said all week." Before he could reply, a man in a navy jacket approached, sipping something fizzy. "Sloane, they want you at the front. Someone from the Times is doing a feature on the exhibit. They're picking 3 artists." She blinked. "Wait, what? You're one of them? Come on." She turned to Yaron, her eyes wide. "I'll be right back. I'm not going anywhere." As she was whisked away, Yaron moved to the opposite side of the room. He didn't like crowds, and he liked being surrounded by people who pretended to care even less. But he stayed, sipping sparingly from a glass of Prosecco, eyes never straying far from where she stood. When she returned nearly 30 minutes later, her cheeks were flushed with excitement. "I'm sorry." "That was wild." "Sounds like it. They're doing a write-up on the show, and they asked to photograph my studio. I don't even know if I can find the floor in there." "I'll help you clean it," he said without hesitation. She blinked. "You'd actually step inside that mess?" "I've been inside worse." "Like where?" "My shareholders' meetings." She laughed, then leaned in. "There's a rooftop garden here. No one ever goes up after dark." "Want to see?" He followed her up a narrow flight of stairs, through a door that creaked open into an open-air terrace. String lights hung overhead, forgotten but still glowing. The hum of the city surrounded them, warm and distant. She crossed to the edge and leaned against the railing. "I used to come up here when I interned with the gallery. Back when I thought I'd never be more than the girl who fetched espresso and refilled ink trays." "You're not that girl anymore." "No," she said softly, "but I still feel like her sometimes." Yaron stepped beside her. "Let me ask you something." "Shoot." "If I told you I wanted to fly you to Paris next weekend, just for brunch at Le Jules Verne and a sketching session by the Seine, what would you say?" "I'd say you're either insane or secretly a travel agent." He didn't laugh. "I'm serious." She turned toward him, reading his face. "You really would do that?" "I can have the jet ready in under an hour, but I won't ask unless you say yes." She leaned back against the railing, watching him. "Why me, Yaron?" He took a breath. "Because every time I talk to you, I remember what it feels like to breathe. And I didn't realize I'd forgotten." Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a flat, square box. "Before you panic, it's not a ring." "That's a relief," she said, trying to steady her voice. He opened it. Inside was a vintage fountain pen with her initials engraved on the silver barrel. "I had it made," he said. "I thought maybe it would help write the next chapter." She took it slowly, running her fingers over the metal. "Do you always do this?" "What? Make it impossible to walk away?" "No," he said, stepping close. "Only with you." She stood on her toes and kissed him then, slow and without hesitation, her fingers still curled around the pen. When they pulled back, she looked at him with something deeper than affection, something that could become permanent if they let it. "I'm not ready for Paris," she whispered. "I can wait. But I'm ready for something." He took her hand. "Then let's start there." Sloane stood in the center of her apartment, surrounded by open sketchbooks, scattered ink pots, and a leaning tower of children's books waiting to be alphabetized. The morning light filtered through gauzy curtains, painting the hardwood floor with soft gold. She was barefoot, her curls still damp from the shower, and she had ink on the side of one hand from testing a new nib. The pen Yaron had given her 2 weeks ago rested on the windowsill, right where she left it every night. 2 weeks. That was how long it had been since the rooftop. Since the night he gave her something that wasn't just expensive, it was intentional. Since the night he told her he could wait. But he hadn't waited passively. Yesterday, he'd sent a messenger with a hand-bound notebook filled with smooth, cream paper and a note tucked inside the front cover. For the stories you haven't told anyone yet. Sloane had stared at it for a long time before writing a single word. Now she glanced at the clock. Less than an hour until the gallery's press shoot. She'd agreed to let the journalist photograph her studio space, which meant she had exactly 40 minutes to turn creative chaos into photogenic charm. She was halfway through stacking books when there was a knock at the door. She opened it, expecting the photographer. Instead, Yaron stood there, dressed in a slate coat and dark jeans, holding a small cardboard box with a modest sticker on the side. Sweet Hazel's pies. Her eyebrows rose. You're early. And holding dessert. I heard bribes are effective with artists. You heard correctly, she said, stepping aside. He walked in, taking in the space slowly. It was the first time he'd been here. The apartment was a reflection of her warm, layered, a little off-center. There were tiny painted animals hidden in unexpected places, a chipmunk on the bookshelf, a fox peeking from behind a lamp. He set the box on the table. Hazel said the peach bourbon crumble was the best one. I didn't argue. Sloane crossed her arms. You went to Brooklyn for pie. I took the ferry. It was faster than traffic. She laughed. You ferried across the East River for baked fruit. I ferried across the East River for you. She opened the box and lifted the lid, inhaling. Okay, that's unfairly good. He watched her carefully. You doing okay? I'm nervous, she admitted. They're going to ask questions about the exhibit, about the future. About why I still work out of a one-bedroom apartment with a broken radiator and a leaky faucet. Then tell them the truth, which is that your voice matters more than your square footage. She looked down, her fingers brushing the edge of the table. I've been offered a residency in Vermont, 6 weeks, all expenses covered, a private studio, mentorship, space to breathe. His expression didn't change. That's incredible. I haven't said yes. Why not? Because I don't want to disappear on the one person who's made me feel like I belong. He stepped closer. You should go. I don't want to leave New York. You're not leaving it, you're expanding it. She searched his face. And what about us? I'll fly up every weekend, or you come back midweek. Or we invent a new train route and meet halfway in the woods. I don't care how, I just care that you say yes to something that scared you in the best way. She exhaled slowly. What if I miss something big here? He tilted his head. You won't, because the big stuff, we'll make sure it waits. There was a knock at the door again, the photographer this time. Sloane kissed Yaron quickly before opening it, cheeks flushed. The shoot took less than an hour. By the end of it, her studio looked like a dream, organized chaos with just enough charm to feel authentic. Yaron stayed out of frame, sitting in the corner with a mug of coffee and Jasper curled at his feet. The bulldog had taken an immediate liking to her, claiming a cushion beside her desk as his own. When the photographer left, Sloane collapsed onto the couch beside him. You didn't have to stay, she said, reaching for a peach crumble slice. I wanted to see what your world looks like on a good day. And it looks like somewhere I could belong. She leaned her head on his shoulder. I think I'm going to take the residency, he smiled. Good, but I also think I'm going to need a better pen case. My current one is a pencil pouch with a unicorn on it. I'll see if Cartier does unicorn embossing. She laughed against his sleeve. Later that evening, they stood at the corner of a quiet street, the sky darkening above them. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I know this started in the most unexpected way, he said softly. But I don't want it to end, not after this, not ever. She swallowed. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I want a future that includes your mess, your stories, your pie addiction. I want morning coffee with too much cinnamon and nights where we argue about whether owls should wear glasses. Her lips curved. They should. See, we're already fighting. She looped her arms around his neck. I want that too. Then say yes. To what? To everything. She stood on tiptoe and kissed him, slow and sure, as the streetlights flickered on around them. 6 weeks later, when she returned from Vermont, Yaron was waiting at the station with a bouquet of lavender and a hand-painted sign that read, "Welcome home, future best-selling author." And this time the train wasn't late. This time everything was exactly where it was meant to be. The wind carried the scent of early spring through Central Park, cool and earthy as Sloane walked beside Yaron, her fingers tucked into the crook of his elbow. Beneath her boots, the gravel path crunched softly and the trees above were beginning to blush with green. She wore a long sage-green coat and a scarf wrapped loosely around her neck, the same one she had sketched foxes onto during her residency in Vermont. I keep thinking I forgot something, she said, glancing behind her. You didn't, Yaron replied, his tone calm. I checked the apartment 3 times before we left. Your suitcase is packed, Jasper's with your sister, and your art supplies are in the car. I didn't mean something physical, she said, adjusting her scarf. I meant emotionally. Like I'm about to walk into something huge and I'm not sure if I'm ready. Then we'll walk in together, he said, slowing near a bench, and if it's too much, we'll walk right back out. She looked up at him, her lips parting slightly. You'd really do that? I'd do anything that kept you from losing yourself. That was the deal, wasn't it? She nodded wordlessly, her throat tight. They reached the edge of the conservatory garden, where wrought iron gates opened to a carpet of tulips in varying shades of coral and gold. Beyond them, a scattering of guests in jewel-toned attire lingered near white chairs arranged in neat rows. A string quartet tuned softly under a flowering arbor. Sloane hesitated. You don't have to be afraid, Yaron said beside her as he reached into his inside pocket and withdrew a delicate velvet box. She blinked. Are you proposing again? No, he said, opening it. Inside was a gold locket shaped like a tiny book. She touched it with reverent fingers, flipping it open to reveal a miniature painting. One page was a fox holding an umbrella, the other a line inked in his precise handwriting. For the chapters still unwritten, her eyes stung. You made this. I commissioned it. From the woman who paints miniatures in Paris. You showed me her work once. I remembered. She didn't speak. She couldn't. He fastened it around her neck in silence. When she finally looked up, her voice was hoarse. I love you. I know, he said, brushing a knuckle along her cheek. Now let's go get married before the quartet gives up and starts playing Coldplay. The ceremony was small, just 30 guests, but nothing about it felt modest. The flowers had been flown in from a farm in Italy that Sloane had once mentioned in passing. The officiant was a former librarian who had introduced her to her favorite childhood book. And instead of a long procession, she walked down the aisle to the sound of soft laughter, her niece giggling in the front row as Jasper, dressed in a miniature tuxedo, trotted down the aisle with the rings tied to his collar. Yaron never looked away from her. Not once. When she reached him, he didn't wait for the formalities. You've always made sense to me, he said, taking both her hands, even when nothing else did. Sloane blinked rapidly. You once told me I made 4 hours feel like 10 minutes. But you've made forever feel like something I want to run toward, not away from. The vows were short. The kiss was long afterward, under a canopy of fairy lights and soft jazz. They danced on the lawn while their friends toasted with glasses of honeyed champagne. You didn't tell me you bought the gallery, she whispered into his ear as they swayed. You didn't tell me you sold out your first print run 2 days ago. She pulled back. How did you? I paid attention. She pressed her forehead to his. I want to build something with you. We already are. No, I mean something new, a space, for kids. A little studio with books and art and stories on the walls, a place where imagination feels like home. I'll call the architect in the morning, he said without hesitation. You don't even know what it'll cost. He leaned down and kissed the tip of her nose. Then it's worth it. The night ended with a sky full of stars and a rooftop picnic at his penthouse, a callback to their first real dinner. Instead of caviar and truffles, they had peanut butter crackers and peach crumble. They curled together beneath a woven blanket as she rested her head against his chest. I used to think love had to be loud, she murmured. Fireworks, drama. Constant proving. And now, I think the loudest kind is the quietest, the kind that stays. He kissed her temple. Then I plan to stay very, very loudly. A year later, the studio opened on the Lower East Side. It was called The Little Den, complete with a mural of the fox from her first book, holding an open umbrella. Children filled the rooms, painting on easels and telling stories into tape recorders. There was a storybook library, a small performance corner, and a velvet reading nook shaped like a tree hollow. They built a life around the unexpected, around quiet mornings and evening walks, around illustrated books and late-night calls from publishers. Around travel and stillness, laughter and pie, and the pages they hadn't yet written, and every time Sloane opened her locket, she smiled. Because the painting inside wasn't just art, it was a promise, one that had already come true.